Okay, welcome everyone. This is Extended Disc 30-minute webinar. My name is Christina Bowser, and I am the senior trainer here at Extended Disc. I just want to remind you before we get started that this is a 30-minute webinar, which we will record and post on our website. So we'll let you know when it gets posted by email. Also, that please, we encourage you to put your questions in the question box, but know that we probably won't get it to it during the session itself because we only have 30 minutes. We want to hit every topic, but I promise you we will follow up with you after the session is over, if not during the session. So, okay, let's go ahead and get started. Again, my name is Christina, and today I'm actually joined by not one, but two of our staff members. I have here with me Markku Kaupinen, who is my boss and the CEO and president of Extended Disc North America. Welcome, Markku.
Thank you, Christina. Good morning.
Good morning. And we have a bonus employee today. She's done webinars with me before. Her name is Hallie Bolander, and she is in charge of our marketing here at Extended Disc. So welcome, Hallie.
Thank you, Christina. It's good to be here.
All right. So as always, we always kind of hit our topic. Why did we pick this topic? And let me just tell you, it is a hot trending topic because we've had twice as many signups as we normally have. So Markku, you want to start us off?
Well, Christina, like you said, this is a topic that continues to be very relevant, and people seem to be very interested in millennials. And when we write a blog or when we do a webinar, like you said, we have doubled the interest always. So I think it was appropriate to talk about it once again. And when I was thinking about this topic, millennials, I started thinking, I'm not a millennial, so that's why I wanted to invite Hallie to join us and really give a first-hand perspective what it means to be a millennial and how we can become more effective in using all the talents that they bring to our organizations more effectively. And what are some of the things that us as managers and a little bit older folks, what we can learn and do better in order to make sure that we work more effectively together and create more value for our clients.
Yeah, I know that Hallie, being of the millennial generation, she's written some blogs for us, and also she would love to have the opportunity to represent her generation. So why don't we go ahead and get started?
All right. So let's talk about the millennials first, kind of how we define them. And these are the folks who are born between 1980 and 1995. Whenever I look at this information, it makes me feel so much older. But this is a fact. And this is a part of the workforce that is growing very rapidly. And Christina, in fact, they are the largest segment in the workforce right now. So I think that's one reason we see so much interest in this topic, because I believe there's somewhere around 70 million people in the workforce who are born between 1980 and 1995. And a lot of organizations are really having some challenges, not only recruiting millennials, but more importantly, how do you really motivate, keep them engaged, keep them employed at the organizations, because they definitely are different than baby boomers and Generation X. And if I really tie it to the DISC system, the DISC model, one of the things we often talk about is that how the I population is growing, not only in the United States and North America in general, but worldwide. When in the past, S styles, those folks that like stable, reliable work environment, they want to do things, they want to execute, they want to be the worker bees. As long as you tell them how to do it, they're very happy to do it. And they are those employees who stay with you for 30 or 40 years and then retire with the gold watch. And that's just not the case anymore. If you look at, for example, baby boomers, they were over 40% S styles. But now when we're looking at the millennials, over 40% of those folks are I styles, and only 27% of baby boomers are I styles. And I think a lot of the things and challenges and issues that we have to deal with the millennials are related to this I style issue.
So just to clarify, because I don't know, when numbers get shot out, I tend to jumble them together. So what I'm hearing is that traditionally the workforce has been made up of S styles. And again, traditionally 40% of the workforce or 40% of the population are S styles.
That's correct. In the past, S styles were the predominant DISC style, and now the I styles have grown. They are already predominant, but when you look at millennials, it's over 40%. Some countries close to 50%. Mm-hmm. And when we look at the DISC styles, when we have a lot of many similar styles together, in this case, the I styles, we amplify the behavioral traits of that style, but we also amplify the weaknesses. And I think some of the challenge we are seeing when it comes to millennials, and by the way, I don't want to say they are the cause of the problem, but there's a change in the workforce, and if we are not adjusting and improving how we do things, those challenges are not going to go away.
Exactly. So, all right, Hallie, here's your opportunity. What Hallie's going to kind of address right now is some of the stereotypes that she finds gets labeled with the millennial generation. So, Hallie?
Yeah, so Christina, when I look at this infographic, one of the things that really stands out to me at first is the only strength that really millennials are given is tech savviness. And I think of that and I think, of course, tech savviness is going to be for millennials because as they've grown up, technology has emerged, but they're not really, having a strength in anything else that they're giving here in this infographic. But one of the other things that really stands out are the cons for each of the different generations. You see the baby boomers and the Gen X's, and it says, they're less adaptable, they're less cost effective. Whereas for millennials, the cons are saying they're lazy, they're unproductive, and they're self-obsessed. And I look at that and I think, my gosh, that's really harsh to describe millennials and almost unfair. And I think that's, a lot of what society has stereotyped millennials out to be.
Yeah. So it sounds like when you're saying, there's pros and cons to every generation, but when we look at the cons for, like, say, baby boomers, well, they're adaptable, but they're just a little less adaptable.
Yeah.
And then when you hit millennials, it's like straight out lazy, unproductive.
Right. Definitely. It's very harsh words to describe us.
All right. Well, let's hit those harsh words.
Yes.
Anything you want to add before we go on, Marco?
Well, the only thing I would say is that the tech savviness is the one that always comes up. And when I look at millennials and all the technology that you guys have available, it's really, for you, it's not technology because you grew up with that. Computers were there when you grew up. Computers emerged when I was growing up, and when I was in college, that nobody had laptops. Very few had a computer available. We went to computer lab and we tried to learn programming. So all of this has changed. So your view on technology is very different. And what I'm trying to learn from millennials is how do we can kind of transform that knowledge and that experience with technology to be able to do things better. And one thing I also, when I look at millennials and think about myself at being when I was much younger, when I went to school, there really was there's no chance of really almost anybody to become a billionaire. And now you have these young billionaires, and I think the view that you have about all the opportunities that are out there are completely different. If somebody wanted to be very rich back then, you had two options: become a rock star or become a professional athlete. You can maybe start a company, but it seemed more far-fetched. When I talk to young people, I see your view of having those kind of opportunities to be very different from my generation. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think we definitely take advantage of the technology that we're given and kind of see, the potential with that and, turn it into multi-million-dollar businesses.
Yeah. It's not that shocking anymore to see a 23-year-old that's a multimillionaire. Or
a billionaire.
Exactly.
And when I'm talking with young people, I can really learn a lot from them, how they look at these opportunities. And they don't have some of those limiting thoughts that I think some of us older people have. And I think it's a really incredible thing that you guys have. And I'm really trying to learn how to really cultivate that, not only learn a skill for myself, but among all of our employees.
I appreciate the fact that you called us older and not old, so I do appreciate it.
Well, since I'm part of the group, I need to be careful with my words.
All right. So, some of the terms that we talked about that millennials get labeled: unproductive, lazy. Do you want to talk about that a little bit, Hallie?
Yeah, and I think Marku made a pretty good point at first, just, bringing up that millennials, they kind of, see technology as their everyday life. And when looking at this picture, I think the older generations might see this and look at the millennials and think, oh, they're being unproductive in their everyday work life. They're just surfing the web. They're not really socializing, in person. Whereas a millennial, I may look at this and think, oh, this is their everyday life. It's kind of blending. Do you definitely see it that way?
Well, yeah, I have to say that now that we have millennials working here at Extended Disc, initially when I saw you on let's say a smartphone during the work hours, or maybe you were on social media, initially my reaction was that you were doing something besides work. And when I really step back and think about why that is, I really have to admit that it's my perception. Because the way I use technology, the way I use a smartphone, when I'm using it at work, I tend to do things like looking at what are the news headlines, so maybe thinking about what the weather might be, or looking at the stock market. So it's not directly related to work. And I think I'm projecting my use of technology to other people. So it's like in DISC, we judge others we judge others ourselves by our intentions, but others by their behavior. So when I see your behavior, I assign intent behind it that's not there. So you might be well using your smartphone, social media for work-related issues, but I'm again projecting my own use of technology to you, and that's not fair.
Mm-hmm. And I definitely think with millennials that, with technology and everything, it's kind of a work and personal life blend. It's 24/7. We're going home and still, looking at our phones and doing work. And I kind of even have a struggle myself just going home, and I see stuff coming in from work and I'm like, all right, this is 9 to 5, put it down, wait till later. And I definitely think, I like how you had said that your use may not be my use for technology.
Yeah, and I think us older people, Christina, what we tend to do, and especially I see this more with baby boomers, they had more clear distinctions between professional life and personal life.
I totally agree with that.
And millennials, I've learned from you that you do not have as clear lines, that you plan, like you say, your life is more 24/7.
Mm-hmm. And I definitely think that even when I'm online at work, I'm still constantly, looking for ideas for work. So I don't want to be, labeled as unproductive because it definitely is a 24/7 thing for me.
Yeah, and we think about now, even when, obviously you approach social media because that's part of your job too. But let's just say you weren't in marketing, you weren't doing social media. We talked about this. A lot of ideas get generated when you are out there looking at LinkedIn, looking at Facebook,
and that's how a blog came up for me too. I was going through LinkedIn and just seeing everything that was being said about millennials, and I thought, I need to write a blog about this because this can't be true.
Yeah, exactly. So I just want to restate what Marku said because I think it's so important. Basically, we judge our own actions by intent. We know what our intent is, correct? Right. Whereas when we're looking at somebody else, we tend to judge them by the behaviors that we see, meaning that we apply intent to how we perceive their behaviors to be.
Yeah, absolutely. But now, only thing I would maybe add to that is that I think that goes both ways. I think there's certainly perceptions that millennials have about Generation X, my generation, or baby boomers, and maybe you do the same. So I think all of generation are really guilty of the same behavior and need to be very cautious of not letting our initial reactions to be the end all. We need to really think about why it is happening.
Yeah, and it goes back to also what I talk about a lot in training is that I always say, think of behaviors and actions themselves as neutral. I mean, I say this all the time. How we define someone as unproductive and lazy, some of the labels that are applied to the millennial generation, millennials may see themselves as truly working, but they're doing it in a way that is not my norm. So let's go on to the next one where we talk about another label that's been given to millennials, which is self-obsessed. What do you want to talk about, Hallie?
I think, millennials are labeled as self-obsessed, and that's kind of the general consensus among older generations of, millennials, is because there's a social media world and we're putting ourselves out there constantly looking for those likes and those comments on our photos and our posts. And I think we come off as self-obsessed because we are putting ourselves out there so much, and our online profiles versus our real life may not totally match up because we are, kind of displaying ourselves more. So I think that's maybe why we come off self-obsessed, but I wouldn't say we definitely are self-obsessed.
I mean, we've coined the word selfies, it has labels. And I guess when these labels are generated in those generations, you kind of associate it with those generations.
Yes.
But, my daughter always tells me, she's doing her homework on her phone at the same time she's Snapchatting. So somehow there's that blending going on that I see. So
one thing I want to ask about the social media, because it's all about the likes, what I've learned. I
Mhm.
remember this one young gentleman in Singapore who was an iStyle said, Marku, it's all about the likes. And that really resonated with me. Okay, that you really want to make sure that people accept you and they are engaged in what you are doing. But if we tie to the disc model, do you think, Hallie, that there are differences in how different disc styles use social media? Now, keeping in mind that over 40% of your generation are I styles, so they're very expressive and very spontaneous, and they do like to be liked.
Mhm.
But how about, for example, the more private C styles? Do they use social media the same way?
I think they all use social media to put themselves out there. They just do it differently. So, for example, I'm an iStyle, I might post a photo, but I also might, put a long paragraph describing that photo, and people may comment on it, and I may interact with them. Whereas a C style may put something really quick, people will comment, but they won't really react to that. So they definitely are putting themselves out there, just because I think that's the general norm with millennials. They're kind of expected to put it all out there, but they may interact and post differently. So you kind of just have to look out for that.
So even in this example, our disc style does show how we do things. So even we can, if we really are paying a lot of attention, we can probably maybe identify somebody's style by looking at how they post on social media like Facebook.
Yes,
Very good.
definitely.
Interesting.
Okay, so I just want to make one comment about LinkedIn. LinkedIn started, as we know, purely professional. It's how do we build our networks between work. But I don't know if you've noticed recently, and again, it's kind of Hallie kind of reintroduced me to it, because I don't really pay attention to my LinkedIn that much, but it's really become more of a cross or a blending of social media built into your workplace. So it used to be, oh, these are all my attributes, for a job, and if you're interested. But now it's like, oh, this is my latest article I've posted. I'm going to do a webinar.
Yeah, I think, back then LinkedIn was somewhere you could just post your resume and people could find you for a job. But now you're able to post and interact, and it kind of is becoming more personal.
Yeah.
I see that a lot out there on LinkedIn. And another thing I thought I should bring up is just how older generations kind of look at the generation after millennials, the boomlets. It's kind of funny how you guys talk about your children and see it's just like, man, they're working really hard.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you say you guys kind of?
Well, yeah, that's true. When I look at my kids and I think about their schedule when it comes to work and their sports activities, and I compare it to when I was their age, I would definitely say that their schedule is a lot busier. I think they have more demands in terms of their schoolwork and everything, really. And I kind of think that I had an easy childhood compared to them. But then when we look at millennials, when I'm talking with people who are around my age, and we are in social settings, and people start talking about what makes their life more challenging at work, millennials often come up, and we hear words like self-obsessed and lazy. And now when I'm actually thinking about this, maybe what we are seeing is that, for example, as a Generation Xer, I'm sure baby boomers, they looked at my generation and said, hey, you guys have it so easy. The next generation always have it easier, but when you skip one, now
we tend to be. It's like grandparents, isn't it? It's like we're hard on our kids, but we're so easy on our grandkids.
Right.
Not that I have any, but I'm just saying. All right.
But I think that's what happens is when we look at the generation after us, we tend to be a little bit harsher on them, not only in terms of how we think how difficult they have it, but maybe that same kind of perception of the generation behind us carries to how we view them at work.
Yeah, and I think millennials look at the boomlets or the generation after them, and they're like, they definitely have it easy. I used to have to write a 10 page essay, handwritten, and now they get to type it up. So I think it definitely, you look at the generation below you and it's easy for them, but then you look at the one after them and you're like, wow, they are working really hard.
So that's something we need to be careful about, really conscious that, hey, we don't jump into those judgments as well.
Yeah, which is a kind of a great, I think, lead in. We've kind of shared kind of what our perceptions of of millennials, and we've given a millennial a chance to kind of give her view. So let's talk about strategies for success, because that's why we're all here. It's one thing to talk about it, but what can we do about it? Because so Hallie, do you want to just kind of talk from your perspective, your own perspective? What is it that would be helpful for you as a millennial, for those that are around you that maybe aren't millennials?
Yeah. So I think, a lot of what millennials want in the workforce is just meaningful feedback. They want to be able to get from their managers or their superiors just, that constant feedback, that to know they're valued, I guess, as well as, having it be meaningful. They don't want to get it and have it almost be random. They want it to be when it's deserved. And I think that's just kind of what I've gained from, speaking with millennials as well as looking online. I think that's, something millennials almost need. It may kind of seem like they want to be coddled a little bit. I hope not.
But it sounds like you're saying, the social norm, kind of how millennials grew up, is that feedback is constant, whether it is face to face, whether it's on the phone, whether it's written,
Right.
whether it's on social media.
Yeah, like how we get those likes and those comments. And then growing up, like for example, in elementary school, I would always you'd have the red card, the yellow card, and the green card. Like green, you're doing good; yellow, slow down; red, stop. So I think we were constantly getting that feedback on how we were doing, and I think we want that, in our grown-up work life.
Christina, I have to share a story here. This comes to mind. Hallie, hope you don't mind me talking about this. About 2 weeks ago, Hallie came to my office, Christina, and she said, "Hey, can we talk for a moment?" I said, "Sure, let's talk." And
You're in trouble.
So really, the long story short, what Hallie wanted to find out that she's making a contribution, which as a leader, as a manager, when an employee says something like that, that's something I love to hear. But then when we're talking, and I was really reassuring Hallie that she is doing great here and she's making a significant contribution and we are learning a lot from her, I really realized that I'm to blame. Because when I even look at things like meaningful feedback, what it means to me is very different than I think it means to you, Hallie. And what I had failed to do is give you that ongoing meaningful feedback so you have a good understanding of how you're doing. And I really felt kind of bad about that because we here talk about this all the time, and we're talking about how we need to modify our behavior when dealing with different styles. And Hallie is kind enough to share her I-style profile here. She's a very high I-style, like many millennials are. And I'm personally very low I-style. So I'm not as expressive. I don't use words like terrific and fantastic. I use you're doing fine and you're doing okay and that kind of stuff. And I think it's perfectly good feedback. But I realized that I was not really adjusting my behavior and providing that meaningful feedback for you. And that was, thank you, Hallie, for that, because that was great learning for me that I really need to be conscious about making a point, making the effort and spending the energy, frankly, to give you that feedback more frequently, which I'm happy to do because ultimately what you wanted to do and what I want you to do is make a contribution. So it's a very interesting thing that happened just recently.
Thanks for sharing. I think, again, just to say, Hallie, talking amongst her peers and her own perceptions, these are some suggestions that she's saying. But I think what Marku is really kind of driving us to that's so important is that looking at the individual as an individual versus as a generation. So why don't you just kind of finish it off for us, Hallie, and talk about what was the other thing that you think would be helpful?
I think what would be helpful with, working with millennials is being flexible on change. I think when they come into the workforce, they may see, what worked 15 years ago may not work right now just because, society and the economy is changing. So when they come to their manager, their superior with an idea for change, they want, to kind of have them be accepted. But also, I think what managers kind of do is they have that stereotype of millennials coming in, and it's just like, oh, here they go with their change. And I think really, it comes down to understanding their disc style and their individual and knowing, kind of maybe how to turn down that change or kind of speak about it and converse. So that's definitely something I think millennials want is just that flexibility.
Yeah, and one thing, Christina, what I've noticed when we have millennials here now is that they do have a lot of new ideas. And what I've really have to do is learn to be more open to new ideas. But one thing that I also, if I really step back and reflect on this, I think there's something millennials can also learn from Generation Xers and baby boomers is that we have one thing on our side, and that's experience. I mean, there's something to be said for that. And sometimes we are not as open to certain ideas because we simply have tried similar ideas. The media might be now social media, maybe it was something else in the past. And we let that for our business or this kind of a product, it maybe did not work. So I think if both generations, all generations, frankly, really try to put those negative stereotypes away, focus on the positive, and then think about what we can learn from each other.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think honestly, you can take out the word generations and put in the word just like a DIS team, where you have people with different DIS styles on any one group, right? People bring whatever their strengths, they bring their areas of development. And it may be challenging to work with people whose styles are different from your own, but in the end, you do have a much richer team. And that's kind of where we're moving to right now, which is from a DIS perspective, again, strategies to success. Number one, it sounds like what I'm hearing. Don't jump to conclusions and, move away from those stereotypes. And then ultimately, we want to move it back to DISC.
And now that you're actually talking about this, something occurs to me. Really, what it ultimately still comes down to is, talking about my perspective here, Hallie, as the leader, as a manager, ultimately, it's my responsibility. Because the only thing that I can control is my own behavior. So we always go back to the 4 steps, understanding how people are different, not making any value judgments, how they are different, how they see the world, how they do things. Step 2, creating that confident self-awareness. Step 3, to understand who you are, Hallie, as an individual. But the 4th step, and that's the only one that I can control, is how I modify our behavior. So I think, Christine and Hallie, if we really just stay away from those negative stereotypes of not only millennials, but other generations as well, and simply take personal responsibility as not only as managers, but as team members, as a part of the organization, about what we can control, and that's the behavior. I think stereotypes exist for reasons, and I think we do need to kind of own up to some of those stereotypes. Look at those. Hey, is it possible that it's true for me? Just like when I look at my DIS report, is it possible that blind spot may be something I need to work on? So I think if we take that personal responsibility, that's really when we can move away from these generational challenges.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry, I would interrupt, but I agree with you. I think we need to help the defining generations helps us when we are making big, broad decisions.
That's right, exactly. If we're thinking about, for example, how we, what kind of work environment we offer to our employees, the cubicles are gone. We need to have a more kind of
open, inclusive.
Right.
I think that's what millennials want.
And that's something that benefits the organization, because that makes you more engaged, makes you more motivated, makes you more productive,
and attractive to millennials. If you want to talk about recruiting.
Yeah, there's really no millennials are obviously here.
Right.
We need to have them. What we need to do is how do we control our behavior, how we lead them, how we motivate them, how we communicate with them, that we really can make them as productive and as include them as part of the organization to help us move forward. There's no other choice, I don't think.
Yeah, but what I'm hearing, kind of that aha moment for me is, yes, we can define this millennial generation and any other generation to help us make decisions. But ultimately, if we want to interact successfully with any millennial or any particular person, we have to look at them as an individual and to acknowledge the fact that, in any communication, we cannot force them to change. We can't force the other individual to make adjustments. The only thing we can do is we can choose to modify our behavior to improve communication, or we can choose not to modify our behavior and accept the consequences.
Exactly. That's like just with any behavioral adjustment we've been talking about for the past 20 years, ultimately it's your choice and your responsibility. What do you want to do?
Exactly. So anything else you guys want to last chance comments at this point?
Well, I think this is conversations that will continue. Mm-hmm. Obviously, there are still challenges, and obviously this webinar is not going to solve all those challenges. But I do believe we take personal responsibility about what we can control. I think that's an important first step. And I think we can learn a lot from millennials. I think you can learn a lot from us. Mm-hmm. And as we work together and are open about how we can work better together, I think things are just going to improve.
Yeah, and I just think the key takeaway from this is just really focusing on the individual, no matter the generation, really just adjusting your behavioral style mm-hmm. to enhance your relationship with them.
And Hallie, I promise to give you more frequent and meaningful feedback. How about that?
Well, thank you guys. That was a lively discussion. I really, really enjoyed it. Like I said, it's just an ongoing discussion and probably even generates more. And based on the feedbacks that we're getting in the question comment section, It's a topic that you guys have a lot of input in and probably a lot of experience and knowledge in as well. So thank you for giving us your input as we go through. Again, any questions that you have that we didn't answer during the session, I promise you we'll follow up with you today. So I'm going to throw it back to Hallie, who is our marketing and social media manager, to talk about this slide.
I just wanted to say thank you as well for listening to my perspective as a millennial and, taking away all of this. I just wanted you guys to know to visit www.extendeddis.org. We post all of our webinars and our blogs, as well as follow us on these different social media platforms at Extended Disc. We're definitely trying to engage with our clients and the public more.
Although we're not on Pinterest yet, but you never know.
You never know.
Hallie, should they like us?
Yes.
And then lastly, before we sign off, thank you again for joining us. And I just wanted to let you know we do have another webinar coming up end of the month, March 29th. Marku and I will be talking about, can DISC help you sell better? So thank you, Marku.
Thank you.
Hallie.
Thank you.
All right. Have a great day, guys.